Usually when a developer feels the need to mention that their game was made by a diverse team of people, I inevitably prepare myself for headache-inducing pandering cringe with no cohesive vision, and the uninstall button becomes more and more appealing. However, Crystal Dynamics lucked out this time because they at least attempted to make an actual Tomb Raider game, instead of Uncharted 2.0. Problem is, they're about 3 games too late. I can't believe that I actually have to make this distinction. Tomb Raider is not, I repeat, is absolutely not Uncharted, nor vice versa. Tomb Raider has always had exploration, puzzle solving, and platforming at the core of its design, with cleverly crafted levels that require precise timing on your jumps if you wanted to traverse them properly, lest you fall to your death or get caught in traps. It was never meant to be too heavy on story. The last time they attempted that, we ended up with Angel of Darkness, and they had to reboot the entire franchise. A strange fate, considering they ended up doing that again with this recent trilogy, and will probably do so again after this game. Lara Croft is kind of like the gold dust of video games. She's constantly reinventing herself over the years and manages to stick around longer than most characters from her era. But despite her status as a character, none of her games have ever reached magnum opus status. They've always ranged from mediocre to at best very good. And unfortunately, Shadow of the Tomb Raider is no different.
There are no parachutes!
Then I'd say you two don't deserve to survive. Making sure you have parachutes is the very first thing I'd check before boarding a charter plane. And you two should have known better, considering you've been through situations where supernatural elements have disrupted weather patterns nearly instantaneously, causing your transportation to crash.
Get ready to jump! No fucking way!
Jonah, we have to!
Are you out of your fucking mind, Lara?
Of course she is. This version of Lara Croft has clearly demonstrated to be a certified sociopath with no regard for anyone's life, including her own. And this is your 3rd game adventure with her, Jonah. You should know what she's capable of at this point. All of you end up surviving this crash. Good to know that Lara showed Jonah the secrets of her Wolverine healing ability and passed it on to him. So that whole opening sequence you just saw was merely an action scene that takes place after the prologue. It serves no real purpose other than being a bombastic opening to kick the game into high gear. This is Tomb Raider, a well-established long-running franchise with a dedicated fan base. You don't need to resort to gimmicks. If you feel the need to start off your game with a high-octane sequence because you're afraid gamers have a short attention span and will lose interest quickly, then you're designing your game for the wrong audience. So after that plane crash scene, the real game begins with Lara buried beneath rubble in a cave. I would have preferred to play that sequence to see how she got stuck. She later mentions that the site is full of traps, and it's not like we've never had a situation where Lara had to make her way out of a cave that was a playable section. But then I guess you wouldn't be able to hide how a seasoned explorer at this point is still able to make rookie mistakes like failing to watch out for traps. That, or like I've mentioned, you would think it wouldn't capture gamers' interest from the get-go, even though this is Lara Croft, the most famous female video game character in existence.
Don't move, I'll get help.
No, I'm right on Trinity's tail. I don't want to attract attention.
Isn't saying that kind of pointless though, seeing as how the very act of pursuing Trinity will ultimately gain their attention? Hell, in the last game, your father's lover turned out to be working as a spy for Trinity. Your fates are so intertwined at this point that it's impossible for you to not be in each other's crosshairs. It also doesn't help that you're continuing to find answers about your father's death. This device triggers a trap that causes a collapse in case anybody stepped on the pressure plate and decided to steal the artifact. But earlier, we saw some Trinity soldiers who looked like they've been deceased for a while. So how the hell were they able to arm the device in the first place? I guess you could say they armed the device, attempted to escape, but got trapped and died of starvation. Plausible theory, but since it's more implied and not 100% confirmed, I don't count it. Oh, Jonah, how many times are you going to get taken to the plastic surgeon and given a facelift before you settle on a stable look? And they gave you a man bun as well? Might as well have just castrated you and sent your balls over to Hannibal Lecter so that he would have a bitter appetizer.
I saw where the passage collapsed on you back there. You want me to take a look at that wound?
No, I'm fine.
And with that, you have taken up a permanent residence in the friend zone. Believe me, one day you will want to purchase a flamethrower and burn that son of a bitch to the ground. Jonah had just mentioned there was a passage where Lara collapsed in, yet there's a clear entrance here that leads directly to the constellation Lara was looking for. She could have simply done more exploration to find the straight path and avoid those traps altogether. I am extremely annoyed at the name of this cafe. Like, bruh. Really? La Casa Mexicana? The most generic title you could have possibly come up with. The Mexican House. While you're in Mexico. Sounds pretty ridiculous when I say it out loud, doesn't it?
Hydra, the serpent. This star is the heart. It's set in the southwest.
So southwest from the Amazon River. Brazil.
You need to go back to geography class, my dude. This is Brazil, and this is the Amazon River. Notice how the river runs east and west, and notice the country in which the river originates from in its western end. Peru.
Procession. The Earth tilts, so over time, these stars appear in a different place on the horizon. Important if you're navigating by the night sky.
Okay.
In the Maya calendar, there's a 2,000-year difference. Back then, the heart of the serpent set directly to the west.
So, that's why it's in Peru, not Brazil. Trinity has been looking in the wrong place.
Disregarding you using a Mayan calendar to find an ancient Incan location, it's later revealed that Trinity not only knows the location of the hidden city, but has been in direct control of it for quite some time now. The only reason why they're here is to gain the dagger, which would have caused a flood regardless of who took it from its place.
Be gone, forced walking segments suck. They do not make things better, I want them gone forever.
I'm not really used to crowds.
And right here is one of your biggest problems with reboot Lara Croft. She comes off as humorless, mopey, and socially awkward even after 2 previous games of building up her character. Old Lara was able to be witty, charming, adventurous, flashy, and confident in her abilities while also being able to show care and anger at times when it was needed. I understand that this is a reboot trilogy and personality traits aren't supposed to be the same as previous incarnations of a character, but I at least expect some improvements and want a character to be more than a stylized brick, so that I'm actually invested in their adventures. When you try to be different for the sake of being different while adding no extra value, then's when you get dangerously close to hack and fraud territory. When you enter that territory, you are beyond redemption and are not welcomed back into my realm where we are free of delusional half-wits and echo chambers.
I'll take care of these guys.
You want to make it even more obvious that you're being suspicious? They're right there in front of you. What's worse is that this actually works, despite Dominguez just saying don't let anybody follow him.
Good. Be sure I'm not followed.
Hope you enjoyed that Dual Pistols fan service at the end of the 2013 reboot, because that's the only instance of them you'll get to see in this trilogy, as Lara returns once again with her trustworthy bow as the starting weapon. You can use the excuse that it's more practical, efficient, and realistic, but then I'll have to point out the merchants you'll encounter throughout the game who sell you guns and silencers while living in a remote village where they're not accustomed to such weapons. Nor do you pay attention to the ammo that's just lying around in random places where ammo wouldn't really make sense. Auto-crouching, I put a restraining order on you that should have prevented you from including yourself in video games. Yet here you are once again trying to ruin my fun.
You work for Trinity. What did they find?
Well, they've been searching for a temple entrance for many years. Today they found it.
This is going to turn out to be super dumb because the entrance is near a cove with a clearly visible skull carved into it. You would think Trinity would have noticed that earlier and get a clear idea there's something valuable nearby. But villains, more often than not, are really good at revealing their ineptitude. Pretty useless trap when the tripwire is not directly in the spikes and one side has already been activated, meaning whoever passes through here already knows the trap has been set off. Tomb Raider continues to maintain its crown as queen of the fake-ass loading screens. I'm actually quite impressed that I hardly notice it in other games these days, making its inclusion here seem all the more noticeable.
So much for the god of creation.
Well, in Maya belief, Kukulkan is the god of creation and destruction.
So Kukulkan is just the type of father who decides to have kids for the sole purpose of carrying on his legacy, but will also murder his daughter if she decides to marry and have kids outside of her race? Ha! I know the type all too well.
There's an inscription. The key to Ishel's heart unlocks the cleansing. We can't let Trinity get hold of this.
Trinity shall not possess this, so let me take the dagger and cause the calamities myself, causing the death of innocent lives, only to hand the dagger over to Trinity, which is exactly what I was trying to prevent. I promise I'm perfectly sane. So, the entrance to this cave that contains a world-ending dagger was just behind a weak wall, which is right next to Trinity's dig site. And it took them years to find this son of a bitch? Please, just retire and let Natla take over from here. Your villainy services are no longer required. This Trinity soldier has clearly been studying the art of off-screen teleportation, because he appears from behind Lara when he was nowhere in sight. I mean, you could say that he was trailing her, but then I'll remind you that I just cleared out that area of enemies.
This isn't the way I hoped with me.
You had her father hunted and she's been under the belief that you had a hand in his death. How the hell did you expect to meet up other than a hostile encounter?
Where's the silver box of Isha? Give it to me.
It's in a safe place.
It never occurred to me that you would just take. But without the box, The apocalypse.
And what was your backup plan if you took the dagger first when you didn't even have the silver box on you to begin with? Also, this is going to turn out to be utterly pointless since it'll later be revealed that Dominguez already knows the box was stolen by a missionary named Andres Lopez. So he's essentially looking for the box in the wrong place when he already knows the box isn't where it's supposed to be. Had to jump through a lot of mental loopholes in order to hide that plot point, didn't you? Don't mind me, just performing my daily villain cliche task of letting the protagonist live, even though she's proven multiple times that she'll do everything in her power to try and stop me. This flood literally started a few minutes ago, and we already have EMTs on the scene hauling people out of choppers? Where's the cheat code that unlocks that sort of response time in real life? I've personally had an emergency, and it took them at least half an hour before they got to my house, and they weren't exactly far away either.
Dominguez, he has the dagger. I lost it. After everything that my father went through, I gave Trinity exactly what they wanted.
I mean, they technically took it from you, but even disregarding pedantics, the power of cutscenes has betrayed us all. Because if that was actual gameplay, Lara would have been able to dispatch them fools with the greatest of haste and recover the dagger. But it's as if we're role-playing that type of woman who finally meets up with a dashing, handsome hunk she's always wanted to bang, but then tells him to go on vacation just so she could end up chasing him again.
He'll use the box and the knife to remake the world.
To remake it into what?
I don't know, he thinks he can rid it of sin and weakness.
Utter imbecile. That's my power, and I don't recall agreeing to share it with any of you assholes.
These people need us here. We can do good now! Besides, what do we gotta go on? A riddle? We're gonna need more than pink fish and silver crowns to get to the hidden city.
You know, I would think after 2 major expeditions together that you would have learned not to underestimate Lara's ability to find ancient cities. She's still an archaeologist after all.
I just can't get those people back there out of my head. They lost everything.
The riddle says, chase the heart of the serpent to the Silver Crown Mountain where the twins confer.
See, this is exactly what I'm talking about, viewer. Jonah's over here thinking about all the people that died in the flood and empathizing with their family's loss, and Lara's completely ignoring his feelings, pretending like nothing ever happened, and takes absolutely no responsibility for the damage she's caused. It's like I'm reliving my past relationships all over again. Lara is not completely covered in mud before she releases her seatbelt, yet she is before she even hits the ground. Miguel is not only able to survive, but he's able to set up a campsite several meters away from the crash, and it hasn't been that long since they've all been separated. Ladies and gentlemen, behold one of the most useless skill trees you will ever come across in a video game. We've already had 2 previous games with this version of Lara Croft, meaning she should already be experienced enough to where she doesn't need to upgrade any of these skills. The only one that's even remotely understandable is the Cayman's Breath, and that's only because this game emphasizes underwater sections more than the previous 2 installments. I don't recall eels being able to live in ponds, seeing as how they wouldn't have enough space or food sources to sustain life long enough to reach adulthood like this one that attacks Lara. But even disregarding that, I'd still sin it for basically reusing the same eel attack that Lara dealt with in Cozumel at the beginning of the game. I would like to know how Miguel gets across to the other side of this ravine when he had no rope equipment that would allow him to do so. Lara had to use the makeshift knife to cut down the supplies in order to get her gear, and there is no evidence that shows Miguel carried anything with him. There would have already been rope here to easily disprove me, and there wasn't.
Every part of the world seems to have its own mythical, forest-dwelling bipedal creature. Around here, it's known as the Sisamite, the guardian of the forest. Described as large and ape-like, it's rumored to kill male humans on sight, but takes the females to its cave for mating purposes.
Prepare to never encounter this monstrosity in the game, even though this is a series where it's practically commonplace to confront ancient beings and creatures of myth. I remember old Tomb Raider games where I fought tigers and T-Rexes without the need for some dramatic buildup. And even disregarding that, this version of Lara has already fought and defeated undead samurai and immortal guardians of the divine source, beings that I'm pretty sure are more dangerous than some jaguars. Aw, look at them trying to be cute by using that iconic scene from Alien 3. Look, Jonah, you want to survive a plane crash? Fine. But at least show me some type of limping so that you can at least pretend to sell me on your injuries, instead of having a parasitic worm infect your arm, which would only be possible if you drank water from a source that was infected with larvae. And even that would take some time before it started showing some visible symptoms.
You sure this is a path?
Come on, stay close to me.
This is definitely not a path.
Jonah, you've gone ice climbing on a mountain that was much higher than this. I would think you would have quelled your fear of heights by now. So I know I said earlier Lara has fought more dangerous enemies than a jaguar, but here, Lara still ends up surviving what would absolutely be fatal bites in any other scenario. Combine that with the fact that this jaguar still ends up hunting Lara despite already feasting on Miguel and presumably the other jaguar Lara killed, and had an easy chance to kill Lara, but decided to leave her alive, and we have a concoction of mind-bending sin fuckery going on here.
Let me take a look at that.
Wait, so you let Lara skin the jaguar before treating her wound? And then you waited until nighttime to do so?
My parents. I miss them too. When I was little, my father used to keep things from me. Hide things. I still have so many questions.
And I have a suggestion. If you're going to make DLC for a game that provides context for a character's motivation in one game, don't then completely ignore it in the next game. If you've played Blood Ties from Rise of the Tomb Raider, you basically got an entire backstory on how Lara's parents met each other, their adventures together, the conflicts with their own families, how, when, and where they got married, their marital troubles, Lara's childhood memories, Richard's obsession with his research, and the secrets he had hidden deep within the manor. You even got to discover how Lara's mom died and see her crypt that was hidden within the manor. And to top it all off, you even got to hear Richard's reflection on immortality, which was the main plot point of Rise of the Tomb Raider.
For all my research into myths of immortality, I may have ignored the most obvious answer to the questions that plague me. We live on through our progeny, our genes, DNA, experiences passed through the generations. Perhaps this is the simple truth of eternal life, and I've just been too stubborn to accept it.
So if you bothered to explore Croft Manor and bring this bit of closure to Lara's life, what questions could you possibly need answers from that would make this game necessary in the first place?
Dominguez said that he would use the silver box of Ishel to remake the world. If you had that power, what would you do?
I'd make a time period where Tomb Raider wasn't rebooted multiple times, didn't try to copy Uncharted, and actually took risks evolving on its own, with a vast array of mythologies and ancient civilizations that would make each of Lara's adventures unique. Flashback within a dream cliche. Lara had her floating abilities even when she was a child. Lord Croft doesn't spot Lara in his peripheral vision.
You are always on the verge. Your obsession is destroying this family.
Obsession? I'm upset.
You are missing your daughter's childhood because you're always in some tomb on the other side of the world. Why can't you be happy with what you have?
Thank you, Miss Croft. God, I'm so sick and tired of dealing with parents who have kids and then end up neglecting them, focusing more on their work and providing for the family rather than spending quality time with their child. And then I have to step in and babysit, and the child ends up thinking that I'm their daddy. But I don't want to be 70 years old getting robbed by some hooligans because they never had a stable relationship with their parents.
Dad?
In the short amount of time since Lara heard the gunshot and attended to her dad, the Trinity agent was able to perfectly position Lord Croft to make it look like a suicide. And Lara was able to trick herself into believing this, even though she clearly heard her father arguing with someone on the phone. Guy driving this vehicle doesn't spot Lara and Jonah clearly hiding right in front of him. This soldier needs to be inducted into the Idiot Hall of Fame. He has the high ground advantage, is pointing his rifle directly at Lara, and could easily just pull the trigger to gain the victory. Weak with the Force, this one is.
Fuck you!
Stop!
I would just like to point out the hilarious hypocrisy of Lara telling Jonah to stop when she has already killed literally hundreds of people throughout this entire reboot series.
I see people down there.
Hope they're friendly.
I'll let you do the talking.
There's another problem with reboot Lara. You'd have to use the world's most advanced microscope in order to find her confidence.
How'd you get so deep into the jungle? You lose your tour group or something?
Abby is going to mention in a few moments that other people have passed by here looking for artifacts.
There were some guys here before, looking for artifacts. You with them?
Trinity.
And if you bother reading some of the journal entries, you'd know that oil companies had conducted business in this area some years back, and even taught the natives to speak English, hence why Abby and the others are able to do so. So why is she surprised people are able to find this village?
What are you here for exactly?
Well, we were following a riddle when our plane went down.
You mean it crashed?
Yeah.
And you just walked out of the crash?
Well, you know, it was cruising pretty low.
Not only does Abby find it unbelievable that Lara and Jonah survived a plane crash and just walked out of it, but the game can't even provide a legitimate excuse as to why they survived. Flying pretty low, huh? You were going through turbulence for a significant amount of time for you to be flying pretty low. You should have immediately crashed.
Estos
Saqueadores. Vienen a la ciudad, nos contratan para desenterrar nuestras propias reliquias. No nos pagan un salario digno.
And then they run off with them and profit.
As you can see, this game gives you the option of turning on subtitles and allowing NPCs to speak their native language, which is great for immersion's sake. However, you'd have to work around how Lara would be able to understand them speaking her native language and still being able to communicate with them. This version of Lara Croft hasn't exactly demonstrated being adept at Rosetta Stone outside of those monolith deciphers, and even those have an arbitrary gameplay prevention of reading other languages before progressing. So picture this scenario, ladies and gentlemen. Peruvian people living in this village for God knows how long have had a history of outsiders coming in and pillaging their area, are now struggling to meet ends, and are completely oblivious to the fact that they have gold ore beneath their waters. Meanwhile, a random English woman comes along, is able to find this gold ore with ease, uses it to trade with merchants that only benefits herself, and is willing to be a savior and solve the locals' problems. I'm just saying, if you were looking to break some media tropes and score brownie points with a particular group of people, you're doing a mighty terrible job at it.
Lara,
What?
Abby said not to break anything.
I'm not breaking it. I'm restoring the original. Someone was trying to hide it.
Well, clearly they didn't do a good job of hiding it, given how easily accessible this temple was, and the fact that the two symbols Lara needs to identify are one of the only parts of this mural that aren't covered up.
This must lead to the next clue.
Go. I'll stay here. See what else I can find.
Don't bother, game. There's no shame in admitting you're splitting from the group plot cliche. You're only making it worse for yourself by trying to hide it from me.
Jonah, I found the temple.
Yeah, right out in the open where you can parachute from any aircraft and is not tightly secured underground, underwater, or deep within a cave. Kinda makes one wonder why the hell it was hidden behind a mural when it's not exactly impossible to access.
Damn. Trinity already there, trying to blast their way in.
And they do so despite their leader being the high priest of the cult that runs Paititi, meaning it's going to be a bit more difficult for him to rely on his powers of persuasion if they're getting ahead of themselves by causing unnecessary explosions nearby. Underwater stealth sections where you have to avoid piranha. Now that is the gameplay concoction from the mind of someone who's the type of person to pick wings off a dragonfly and use chihuahuas as a piñata.
Holy Christ! They're here!
You know, when an ally gets strung up on a tree, I too like to shoot in any direction other than the one where he's hanging from. This is the only time you'll ever see the Ashil venturing outside of the cenote, even though their whole purpose is to guard the silver box of Ixchel, which is not where we are currently located. I find it rather abhorrent that some of the extra outfits in this game are the same ones from Rise of the Tomb Raider, and what's even more insulting is that the one outfit heavily implying classic Lara doesn't even have shorts, cause God forbid we let the iconic female badass be strong and sexy at the same time. That would crush the minds of everyone who only picked up a video game within the last 6 years. When even Fortnite shows more respect for your iconic female character, it's time for you to pack up and go find a different industry to work in because you are clearly not cutting it here.
I may know another way around.
If you know another way around, why did you bother taking this path to begin with? Especially since it has some trials for you to pass. And this becomes even more baffling when Jonah ends up being at Paititi before Lara. So if Abby was able to lead Jonah to Paititi, how come she and her people never found it before now?
Still standing after centuries of earthquakes and storms.
Precisely why I find it questionable that it's still operational. Earthquakes tend to displace that which has been built and render them no longer functional. The only way this trial would still be working is if generations of the locals have constantly revisited it and restored it over the many years since it was built. And I never came across confirmation of that.
Jonah? The view up here is amazing.
Congratulations, you've entered an area that could have been spotted by any chopper flying within the vicinity. It astonishes me how adventure games are still able to get away with discovering places that could have easily been found by modern technology. I am very curious as to how Etzli got caught here. If you look closely, it seems like the rope is intricately tied to his ankle, meaning this is a bit too sophisticated if it were a simple rope trap. All this time in the jungle and you fools haven't learned you never bring a blunt weapon against someone who has a bow and arrow? Yep, that's enough to get counted as a saving the hero in the nick of time cliche. There is no point in covering Lara's head when your hidden city is adjacent to your current location, and Lara will continue to explore once we get assigned some side missions, so she would have discovered the path to get to the hidden city regardless.
You're not only my son, you're my heir. You must not court unnecessary danger.
And you should not unnecessarily discuss sensitive information in the presence of a stranger.
If you're not with the cult, how did you find this place?
This is the second time in this trilogy where Lara has fought against a cult in charge of a long-forgotten piece of land. I understand. Sometimes it's difficult to let our creativity get sacrificed at the altar to please the masses.
What is this? Cultist. Waiting for their deity to appear.
Their deity, who you will later confirm in a few moments was raised by outsiders and therefore shouldn't have any influence over the cultists since he wasn't around the people of Paititi during his upbringing. He's a sperm donor pretending to have control over their children, even though they were never present in their kid's life, and now years later returns to collect the welfare checks, steal the child support money, and declare himself as the eco-friendly god emperor using the sun to usher in a golden age of renewable energy.
Follow Esley. Your clothing won't hide you long from these guards.
Really? The clothes are what you're concerned about, and not Lara's distinct European features that clearly make her to be an outsider?
I don't think anything could have prepared me for this place.
Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed is a prime example as to why it is important for you to play previous entries of a video game series if you're going to be writing for the next installment. Lara has already been on an island featuring undead Oni and supernatural powers while coincidentally also fighting against a cult. And she's defeated an entire army of immortal soldiers who protected a divine source that is able to grant immortality. How does all that experience not prepare you for a time like this? All hail the mighty silver pool. So, I understand this is an adventure game and exploration is key, but I cannot overlook the glaring issue of Lara never using the old irrigation system that leads directly into the chamber containing the serpent key. You would think an artifact that is so precious and important would be more heavily secured than this. I mean, granted, there is a little waterfall you'd have to get through, but Lara's overcome bigger challenges than that.
There's the little rebel prince.
How is the cult just now noticing that Etzli is part of the rebels? He's Unuratu's son, whom the cult opposes, and they've been in Paititi together for years now. Ready for a random chase sequence that's completely pointless, since Lara and the cult will still be in Paititi and there will be no consequences afterwards? Teach me your exceptional methods, random cult guard. I aspire to develop such astonishing teleportation methods that would send all my enemies slipping into a stage fatality from how much I surprise them. The cult, which has controlled and patrolled Paititi for centuries now, still can't figure out where the rebels are hiding. I mean, you had one openly try to assassinate Dominguez not that long ago. Sam Fisher would be vomiting in his retirement home right now at how lackluster your stealth is sneaking into well-lit areas like this. There is no reason for Unuratu to get captured here. Lara is already on the lookout, has the high ground advantage, and already eliminated one of the cult guards attempting to do so. Damn, I'm getting reboot flashbacks where we acquire the shotgun more than halfway through the game. That was 2 installments ago. One of the big ideas of sequels is that you don't repeat the same mistakes you made in earlier entries. Excuse me? Why did the game decide it was suddenly going to turn into a horror game with this jump scare? The game already hinted at the Yashil earlier on outside of Kuwak Yaku, so we were going to encounter them at some point anyway.
I can use these to climb out of here.
I'm wondering why you didn't pack them in your gear on your way here to Peru. You did have them in Cozumel at the beginning of the game, which was before all of these events.
Etzli's scouting the temple in the upper district.
But Etzli was captured by the cult guards not that long ago, and his rescue attempt is the whole reason why Unuratu is in captivity in the first place. How would the cult not recognize him within the district, much less allow him access within the district?
When Etzli's father Sairi died, Unuratu bestowed the honor of surrogate father onto me. One of my duties is to gather 3 sacred items for the ceremony.
And I'm gonna stop you right there, pal, because the rule of 3 cliché is not allowed to taint my land anymore. It deserves to be tied in a burlap sack and taken directly to Heihachi Mishima so that he can toss it into an erupting volcano. But then it would return just like Kazuya did. Fuck.
You and your friends are safe.
This doesn't turn out to be a major plot point. A spy infiltrating the rebellion ranks that prevents them from making their moves is something that I would expect to carry bigger consequences than what we get. Instead, it turns out to be a conflict that gets resolved off screen.
I'm confident I can deal with any rebel I meet.
Ha! Hot, bello!
I was already going to send Lara being able to pass as a serpent guard despite her obvious English accent confirming her as a foreigner and the fact that she's already wanted by Trinity and part of Unuratu's rebellion. But then the local language put a cherry on top of this already deliciously atrocious bullshit sundae. How do these guards not spot the wanted son of Unuratu right in front of them? The same could be said for this side mission rescuing Hakan. You have to use an attendant to sound the horn followed by a musician to begin playing instruments, concluding with using 2 people to pull the 2 levers opening the cell door. And somehow, it works.
Don't worry, I'm a friend. Trust me, I'm a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Don't you mean you're a sheep in wolf's clothing? You know, since you're disguised as the enemy, but you're really here to help the rebels? Hakan is never spotted again by the cult guards despite still being within the plaza. You'd think they would immediately realize their prisoner who was soon to be executed has escaped from captivity.
I am the only one who sees the real threat here.
You come and go as if your life here is optional.
Yes. I have lived the outside world and I have seen what's to come. Every day it encroaches. Paititi will not survive its invasion. Everything we are will be taken or destroyed.
Well, then we must fight for it together, according to the will of its people.
By restoring the sun, that will only ensure Paititi's safety for a moment. But then, it doesn't protect us from discovery, invasion. Our destiny is to be doomed. No!
I see that self-awareness is a trait that's also rare in video games as it is in real life. Dominguez just confirmed he treats his life in Paititi as a secondary consideration, but wishes to prevent its culture from being destroyed. Yet he willingly directed outsiders / Trinity to discover its location, approved Trinity detonating explosives around its nearby temples, and deliberately opposes the wife of his dead brother.
When we get Unuratu out, we'll all go find the box together.
Lara should have told Jonah that the box is missing, since she never found it while in the Eye of the Serpent, and she just overheard a conversation with Unuratu and Dominguez confirming that a missionary stole it 400 years ago.
The box is gone. A missionary, Andres Lopez. He stole it 400 years ago.
There's a side quest where you meet a Shorn One warrior named Koryanka, where your mission is to retrieve the shield of the Agemaker, which was believed to be proof that Unuratu is the chosen one to lead Paititi into the new era, due to her direct ancestral link to the first emperor. But it turns out that the shield encourages all to create destiny, and isn't anointed to any particular descendant of a previous emperor, meaning it was never Unuratu's destiny to lead Paititi. But that also means that Dominguez is not the chosen one as he proclaims to be, and this piece of evidence would likely cause the cult of Kukulkan to betray him and bring validity to the rebellion. But this is just a DLC mission that has no bearing on the main plot, which it should. This is the second time someone has the high ground advantage on Lara and still fails spectacularly.
Amaru has not yet seen the box, but already its power corrupts his mind.
But since Amaru spent a good portion of his life in the outside world, wouldn't that corrupt him more so than the silver box he doesn't even have yet?
We face many threats from the outside, but risk is a part of life. We must confront it.
Really easy to say when Lara has been the one to face all the trials at this point. Even went so far as to traverse the Eye of the Serpent and face the Ashiel, which is where the silver box was supposed to be located.
This is Commander Rourke. We've got a lead on the box. Send a team for Croft.
Well, is that another villain who has the perfect opportunity to kill the protagonist, yet refuses to do so when he just killed the protagonist's ally?
The box. It will tempt you. Resist.
Character dies right after spilling crucial information cliché.
Commander Rourke is a highly trained, multi-decorated veteran of the US Special Forces.
Why is the game just now providing this information about Rourke when he's been assisting Dominguez since the beginning of the game? It's like they treated him as if he was insignificant until he shot Unuratu and only now wants to make him a big deal. Like, dude, we're in the third act of the game already. You should have had this set up way earlier.
I had my crosshairs on the younger one too, but Rourke had orders for us to leave her alone. This is the bastard who shot Anna.
So the ending to Rise of the Tomb Raider that hinted at an important detail to future games was just a throwaway line in a diary. It's even more questionable considering Trinity doesn't want another Croft figuring out the truth of their goals and getting in the way of their conquest. That's why it's so weird they let Lara live at the end of Rise and have done a terrible job trying to stop her in this game.
Forward outpost. Croft is moving into your area. find her.
Hey Lara, maybe turn off the radio so that the enemies don't easily detect you, especially when we're about to encounter these guys with thermal goggles that can spot you in grass. Also, these thermal goggle enemies are literally here for this part of the game and then never seen again. Kind of thought they would have been introduced earlier and be more common given the amount of stealth that's present. Yeah, I know. How dare I sin the so-called coolest moment in the game. Look everyone, I know we've all had that time where we're watching a piece of media and then a particular moment occurs that feels so out of place and you just become bug-eyed and think to yourself, what the hell is happening? Why is this happening? This is that moment for me. I was almost half expecting Lara to say, ready to comply, before going on her rampage.
My friend Sarah's an archaeologist. She works near here. You want to go see if she knows anything about your riddle?
Wait, so Abby had an archaeologist friend this entire time and we're just now getting to meet her? Why didn't we join with her earlier and compare notes so that Lara would have an ally who can actually understand what the hell she's talking about?
Jonah, those 2 Bible quotes. The sun will be darkened, and under his wings you may seek refuge.
What does it mean?
That's it. Look for a heron and an eclipse.
You're only now figuring out that's what you need to look for? The heron and the eclipse were the same tattoos Unuratu showed you back in Paititi, and they were the same engravings on the altar where the box was supposed to be located.
Lopez had his disciple wall him in, and then... bang.
Well then, Detective Croft, not really an effective secret for Lopez to keep if you manage to figure out what happened.
Only the hands of the righteous one may seize destiny from mine.
I guess it's you then.
Yeah, and what would determine who's the righteous one when anybody who finds the box can just take it? It's not like you need to pass one more trial before you're able to pry the box from Lopez's hands.
He led us on this goose chase. He sabotaged every clue.
All to keep this box from Trinity.
And the people of Paititi.
Well, damn, would have been better for Lopez to just erase all the clues leading to his discovery. That way, Dominguez would have never figured out he was the one to take the box and wouldn't have attempted his last-ditch effort to deceive Unuratu.
I just need the box.
Fuck you!
Well, I guess we're done here.
The Universal Champion known as Plot Armor once again gains a tainted victory. Amaru literally has no reason to let Lara and Jonah live right now. He already has the dagger. He could just kill both of them right now, take the box, and remake the world without further interference from either of them.
Your father was brilliant.
He was taken from me before I could know.
He was my friend. He refused to see the potential for destruction in his work. He had to be stopped.
Well, aren't we taking a little detour to Retcon Hills? Rise had clearly stated that Lord Croft was being trailed by Trinity in his pursuit of immortality, and never said anything about him being allies with Amaru or Trinity as a whole, nor was this so-called connection ever mentioned in the Blood Ties DLC. Immortality, the entire reason Lord Croft searched for the divine source, is never a plot point in this game, so I can only interpret this as another attempt at deception by Amaru.
He refused to see the potential for destruction in his work. He had to be stopped.
You had him killed.
And you're surprised at this because why? You've known that Trinity was behind your father's murder since the last game. Dominguez is the leader of the High Council of Trinity. Pretty easy to figure out who ordered Lord Croft's assassination.
You're a low, selfish, murdering coward.
And you, Lara? How many lives have you ended?
You know, Dominguez may be a colossal asshole, but he kinda has a point. There were multiple times in Rise where Jonah and Anna tried to convince Lara that pursuing her father's research would only end in tragedy, yet she persisted. And in this game, all the calamities were caused by her taking the key of Shock Shell in the first place. And why? So that she can find answers to her own quest. Consequences be damned. This sequence is beyond ridiculous. You had Jonah take the box, Trinity chasing after him, and then we just transition right into a stealth action segment as if nothing ever happened. Like, I know I've ragged on set pieces before, but this is one of those instances where it would actually make sense. Just have a set piece where Lara chases after Trinity before they catch up to Jonah and avoid some obstacles along the way.
Jonah, where are you?
I'm in the cane field. They can't see me.
Earth to Lara and Jonah, Trinity has already shown to have tapped all channels and are listening in on your communications. You're just giving yourselves away when you just tried to escape them.
Croft, I know you're out there. I should have killed you in Siberia, but Dominguez was against it. That's on me. But I'm gonna fix that mistake. Now.
Hey, jackass, you also had an opportunity to kill her back in Paititi after you shot Unuratu, but apparently you forgot to fill out your villain cliche quota for the week.
Lara, I'm in a chopper. I've got a pilot.
What?
Exactly my reaction. I can tolerate Jonah kind of remaining hidden while escaping, but how the hell did he make it to said chopper and then doesn't get shot once Dominguez discovers him and retrieves the box? You all are approaching RE3 Remake Nemesis and how often you waste your opportunities for victory. Abby, I'ma have to give you a sin for how randomly you arrive, no vehicle ever shown, and then just disappear with Jonah while Lara has to outrun a mudslide. Only in fiction can you witness an ancient group of people who are technologically outclassed in every way gain a victory like the Yashil downing this chopper.
They're with you?
Your men were attacking them, you imbecile. And even if that weren't the case, they would be on your side if the ritual was your right to complete. And they clearly are not. Commander Rourke, you are now officially on the list of most pathetic deaths in video game history. You literally have an army of highly trained soldiers by your side, and you are currently in an APC firing a turret, and you still end up getting killed. And normally, I would let that slide. But you had an impressive list of credentials when we were reading your diary earlier, so I would have expected a better effort. The final boss, if that's what you want to call it, requires you to sever the ritual connection of 3 Trinity members before Dominguez turns into a teleporting asshole while also having his henchmen assist him. And if you've spent enough time on my channel, then you already know where this is going. So throughout this game, it's been established that the temptation of the box is extremely powerful, but all it does here is show a memory of Lara's childhood. So you know how in Zack Snyder's Justice League, Cyborg enters the domain of the mother boxes after he had failed to sync them up, and is tempted to return to his parents because he had trouble coming to grips with his new synthetic body, and then outright rejects it because he comes to realize that he's not broken or alone? I was expecting a moment like that for Lara, where she's tempted with the fantasy of living happily ever after with her parents and then tricking her into betraying her allies. But what Lara does is come to grips with the fact that she cannot bring her parents back and she should accept their passing and choose her own path. Don't know about you, but I don't think they needed an entire trilogy to tell that story.
Safe travels, Jonah. Once Paititi is restored, perhaps I can join you and learn more about the world beyond Paititi.
But dude, that's exactly what Amaru did, and it ended up warping his mind. Why would you want to repeat that same mistake?
I'm not sure what the future has in store, Jonah, but whatever adventure's on the horizon, I can't wait to meet it.
Boy, you better continue the series with this version of Lara then, because if not, that's going to make this sequel bait much worse. And if that ends up being true, maybe you shouldn't have done it in the first place.